Hello and welcome to Dingoes Ate My Podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.
And this week we're discussing the episode Shiny Happy People. This episode originally aired April 9th, 2003, attracting approximately 3.92 million viewers.
Which is probably for the best, because the last thing we need is a whole bunch of happy, obsessed people, because we have a bunch in this episode.
It's also a reference to an REM song. I take it you're not familiar with the REM song?
I wouldn't be surprised if I was, but not at this moment.
Okay. Let us move on to the number one film in America this week. Dave, any idea?
Again, from what you mentioned last week, that it was something.
So last week was Head of State with $13.5 million. This week it is a different film, I will tell you that much. And it's a film I quite enjoy, although I doubt you've seen it because it's not really your jam. I don't think.
This is nothing immediate. Like, the one particular thing that popped to my mind was something from the Ring series, but I'm not sure if that was either a thing now or if it was a thing in the past.
The Ring... I want to say The Ring is around this time. Yeah, it's 2002 as well, but it's later in the year.
Okay, because I know that there were a couple of big things, video game wise and movie wise, that were coming out this year, but I wasn't sure if it was earlier in the year or later on.
Yeah, The Ring is in October. And I don't think it ever actually becomes the number one film. Or no, sorry, The Ring is 2002. I got my years mixed up. The Ring was 2002. And the sequel wasn't until like 2004-ish, maybe. 2005. Okay. Yes. So, any ideas?
No, that was about it.
Oh, okay. It's a great movie that I don't know if you've ever seen called Phone Booth.
Not immediately ringing a bell.
Okay. So, it's a really great, like, thriller film where Colin Farrell's character is trapped in a... I'm going to really date this movie. He's trapped in a phone booth while this sniper has him on the phone and tells him that he has, like, his gun aimed at his head, and he has to, like, do a bunch of stuff in the phone booth and stuff. It's really good.
Mildly interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if someone saw this movie and supposedly tried to pitch it as a crazy live-action game show idea.
The film also takes place in real time, which is kind of cool.
That's an interesting concept, too.
Yeah. It's,
and in another case, I'm not too surprised. But again, it's one of those cases of, yeah, I'm not surprised that I heard of this movie, but it's also a case that I wouldn't be surprised that this movie passed me by.
Yeah, I totally get that because we would have been like 13 at the time, and this would definitely not have been your jam then. It also features Kiefer Sutherland, who was also on 24 at the time, which was also a show that took place in real time.
Yes.
In massive air quotes, because some of the stuff that happens in that show could not happen in the amount of time they say it does. Anyway.
Yeah.
Let us move on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. Any idea what it could possibly be?
Just from your voice to tone, I wouldn't be surprised that 50 Cent is still sitting up in the spot.
It is still Into Club by 50 Cent. Yes. Apparently people really like that song. Anyway.
Yeah.
Moving along to video games for this week. There's not a ton, but there's a lot of really good stuff. So it's a strong week. So on April 9th, the same day this episode came out, if you had a GameCube, you could pick up a little game called Burnout 2 Point of Impact.
Ah, yes.
You're familiar with the Burnout series, I'm assuming.
Vaguely. Case of, I've heard of the series, but never actually played it.
Really? Oh, you should definitely play the Burnout games. They're great. There's an entire mode in these games called Crash Mode, where you basically can just crash cars and get points for it.
Yeah, that's understandable.
It's a ton of fun. And it's kind of like a puzzly thing. It's fun. Anyway, also on April 9th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Crazy Taxi Catch a Ride.
Which, again, I'm not too surprising, but it's also a driving game on a Game Boy Advance.
Yeah. I love that they tried to put Crazy Taxi on the Game Boy Advance, but I just have a feeling that it wouldn't work very well.
It's trying to put that style of a game from, I believe it was originally kind of designed from arcade and the big booths and whatnot onto a Game Boy Advance, which the portability, yay, but actual graphic style and whatnot is kind of behind the times a little bit.
Yes, it definitely is. Also, on April 9th, if you had either, if you're a PC gamer, had a Dreamcast, or a PlayStation 1 in 2003 still, you could pick up a little game called Evil Dead Hail to the King.
Yeah, because that was a thing.
Evil Dead was not really a thing in 2003.
It was still kind of a thing, and it most likely had fans, but not a lot.
I mean, Army of Darkness was the last movie, and that was in like '92. This was not. Releasing a game at the height of the franchise popularity.
Yeah, but nevertheless, the fans most likely existed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's also apparently not very good. So
Mob sadness.
I do love Evil Dead though. Moving on to April 13th, if you're a PC gamer, you could pick up a little game from a franchise that's not at all controversial called Postal 2.
Ooh. Ooh. I somewhat know about this, but the case of I haven't actually played it and most likely don't have too much memory of it, but oh boy, I know about it.
Yes, so for those of you who are too young to remember the Postal games, aren't you fucking lucky? I know some people probably really like the Postal games, but, like, they're pretty shit.
Yeah.
Wait, they released Postal 4 in 2022?
I wouldn't supposedly be surprised, but
That's friggin' hilarious. Oh, that game has to be terrible. Because I never heard of it, and I love terrible games.
yeah,
Largely
it's kind of
negative
one of the
reception.
things, case that terrible games aren't exactly very much put out on the news that they're being released.
Oh my god, okay. GameSpot gave it a 1 out of 10. And IGN gave it a 2 out of 10. So yeah.
Saying their standards, I suppose.
That's hilarious. April 14th, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up a much better game than Postal 2. A little game called Golden Sun: The Lost Age.
Ooh, very much fun.
Yes, I've always wanted to get into the Golden Sun games, but I've never played any of them.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky sort of things. And again, just the case that the only available thing is either finding a copy for the Game Boy Advance and or the DS with its future release, or getting the download version on the Wii U store, which is only here for another 2 or so months.
I wish they would just, because there's 3 of them, so I'm like, why don't you just re-release them on the Switch, like put it like a trilogy bundle together and throw it on there?
It wouldn't be surprising. There was supposedly a game that's been released on PC for the longest while, and they supposedly were going to release it on the Wii U, but they just released it for the Switch recently.
Yeah, I would love to, because I would love to play those games. Anyway.
It's kind of one of those cases of just their whole business plan of things. It's not going to be surprising that after the store shuts down for the Wii U and the 3DS, a couple specific select little titles are going to be sent over to the Switch then, and everyone's just going to be like, oh my dear God, why Nintendo? Of course, we all know the reason why, but still the case of,
I love their argument that, like, well, that'll cost us Wii U sales. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody owns a Wii U. I mean, I know you have a Wii U, but you're, like, the only person I know who actually owns one.
yeah.
Oh, actually,
That and it's technically also my Wii system for playing particular things, despite also being the crazy person that actually also has a Wii.
I think Justin had a Wii U. Now that I think about it. But, yeah, I don't know many
No, I
people.
wouldn't be surprised if he did, though. I think it probably only might have been for the game or two. I'm not sure how big his collection would have been.
I have no idea. And finally, the last game for this week on April 15th, if you had a GameCube, now I'm probably going to butcher this pronunciation, You could pick up a little game called Ikaruga. Wait, do you actually know this?
Yes, but it's also the case that I haven't specifically played it. But there's the style of game. Uh, the particular thing I can think of is either from the arcade or old PC games like Grandia, little character shooting a whole bunch of
Yeah,
particular
yeah.
things on the screen, moving along the screen. And this one took a vertical style and it had the interesting concept of you could change how your ship absorbed attacks, and it switched from light attacks to dark attacks, and you could get through levels and other sorts of things. Again, I'm trying to remember the particular name of that game style. Um, it's escaping me, but it's essentially Bullet Hells. That's what it
Yeah, yeah.
was. But it was one of the big famous ones that I remember being advertised from Nintendo in Nintendo Power and with other particular things being like, oh man, this game looks fun. And then they actually show you gameplay and you're kind of like, is this actually? And then they show you the later levels and you're like, oh my dear God.
Yeah, so I never heard of this game. I don't remember it at all, but that's cool. I
It
did.
was.
Um, I enjoyed a game similar to this that I'm going to shout out because nobody remembers it.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Dave, did you ever play a game called Captain Skyhawk on the NES?
The name, surprisingly enough, rings a bell, but it's kind of mixed in with about 3,527 other games that most likely have that same style.
Okay, so it was developed by Rare, which isn't surprising because Rare made a bunch of games.
It was.
However, it was published by an interesting company. It was published by Milton Bradley.
On the one hand, I'm not too surprised. I'm sure that they would most likely dip their hands within the video game scope of things around the time, but yeah, it's kind of one of those weird things.
Yeah, I don't know how many video games they actually published, but this was one of them, and it's a great game, and everybody should go out and play it. You can get it on eBay for like, I want to say like probably less than $10 on the NES. It's well worth playing.
With, any particular person that has capability of getting a system that can play NES games.
Or just, emulate it. Because, Anyway, we shall move on to the episode.
Indeed.
Dave does not want to move on to the episode.
No, I will tolerate and go through the episode despite the fact of suffering through it once.
Okay, so after bursting from Cordelia's womb in a flash of blue-green light, the godly woman materializes and covers herself with a blanket. She appreciates the world around her and thanks Cordelia for giving her life. Guiltily, Angel offers the woman his sword to punish him for his earlier intentions of killing her. Fred cleans up around the office while she worries and rants to Lorne about what happened with Cordelia and whether Angel could really have killed her. Connor returns to the hotel and Fred pulls a knife on him, but his strange, peaceful demeanor confuses her. Angel shows that he's returned as well with a no longer pregnant Cordelia, and he's just as strangely happy as Connor. Wesley and Gunn come upstairs from the basement where they were dismembering Skip, and they all marvel over Cordelia's return and the strange behavior of Angel and Connor. Awestruck, Angel and Connor boast about this godly creature that rose from Cordelia, whom they don't want to kill, but merely to worship. Wesley tries to convince Angel that he's under a magical influence and this creature is evil. But then the woman arrives and kindly offers to help the gang as they fall to their knees. Later, as Cordelia rests in a bed and candles are lit around the room, the woman explains how she was power in the very beginning before man, then became a watcher as humans developed, and finally could not stand to watch any longer and planned to return. She explains how Angel's trip to the trials to end Darla's life brought not only Darla's life but Connor's, which was just one of the miracles necessary to bring her into the world. Once Connor was born and Cordelia had ascended to a higher plane, she had the vessels necessary to bring her into the world. She then tells the group that they have all been drowning in the war against evil, but soon she will take them on the offensive and turn the tide. A group of vampires tries bowling with a human head for a ball, but it doesn't work. One of them tries to explain that they're there for a good reason, but he doesn't have time to finish as the gang appear and start the fight. The woman and Fred sit and talk about a name, but as they sit, one vampire scratches the woman with its claws. Angel chases the vampire outside and stakes it in front of a large group of dining people. The woman comes outside, her arm bleeding from the scratch, and the crowd falls to their knees. She preaches to them about her power and how wonderful the world will be now that she's there. A man in the crowd grabs a knife and charges at this apparent monster, but Angel vamps and stops the man, punching him repeatedly. The woman stops Angel and brushes her hand against the man's face before asking Wesley to call for an ambulance. She continues to preach to the crowd about good things as the beaten man wonders why the others can't see what he sees. At the hotel, the gang tries to brainstorm ideas for a name that fits this woman. Fred feels guilty about letting the woman get hurt and muses how she can clean the shirt for the woman. Despite the lack of need for it, as Fred rushes off to continue trying to clean the shirt, the woman observes a common love between Wesley and Gunn have for Fred. Connor apologizes for allowing the woman to be hurt, but she shows that the wound is almost completely healed already. He questions why the man tried to hurt her, but she doesn't have much of an explanation for him. The woman moves outside to see Angel, admiring the smell of jasmine in the hotel's garden. Angel feels terrible about failing her again, and worries about becoming too happy, but the woman offers him inspiration and comfort for his feelings. Fred scrubs roughly at the shirt while Angel and the other males set on a mission to destroy the vampires, demons guarded by the all-powerful woman. The next day, Fred returns to the lobby, revealing that she had to buy a new shirt for the woman, then breaks down into tears because she can't stand not being around her. Upstairs, Lauren shows the woman her new, beautifully decorated room, and she loves it. After Lauren leaves, she senses Connor walking in the halls outside and invites him in to talk. She explained why he's special, why he deserves happiness, and why he was chosen to be her father. Fred comes into the room to give the woman the new shirt, but instead of the woman's natural beauty, Fred sees a decaying corpse covered in insects. She panics, and as the others come in to see what the fuss is about, she quickly excuses herself. Fred goes to talk to a still unconscious Cordelia and tells her about the seriousness of the situation, since no one else seems to be aware that there might be a problem or how to deal with it. Angel catches Fred and talks to her about how great the new woman and talks to her about the great new woman in their lives. Fred tries to get him to think about the strangeness of the situation and the seemingly wonderful woman, but Angel's faith is unwavering. Later, Fred goes to the local hospital to check upon the man who attacked the godlike woman. The receptionist eventually tells Fred that she can find the man, John Stoller, in the psychiatric ward. Fred sneaks into John Stoller's room, where he's strapped to the bed, and confronts him about what he saw. She convinces him that she saw the same thing, and then he reveals the side of his face that Jasmine touched had become deformed and decayed. He tells her that she's called like him to stop this woman and her evil, but Fred doesn't like that idea very much and runs off. Fred returns to the hotel to find the hotel is full of people who follow Jasmine back to the hotel after she took a walk. Fred talked covertly to Wesley about her visit to the hospital and what she saw. Wesley says he believes her and then goes over to talk to Gunn and then Jasmine upstairs. The news spreads among the gang and Fred panics. Heading for the weapons cabinet, she grabs a crossbow and lets a bolt fly at Jasmine. Angel takes the bolt in his shoulder and drops to the floor below with Connor chasing after. Lauren tries to confront Fred about her actions, but she pulls a knife on him and uses it to keep the others at bay. Jasmine tells Fred that her love will always be there and Fred needs to let Lauren go, then runs away alone. Fred drives alone and stops along the street crying to herself. Later, after the other guests have left, Angela brings the woman a bundle of jasmine flowers, while the others talk about the fact that Fred is now evil. The woman tries to motivate and keep the mood positive, but classifies Fred as a danger to their purpose. The gang decides that they need to kill Fred, but the woman suggests that they wait and try to help her first. A depressed Fred has breakfast at a diner, and she watches as the morning news program has a special guest, the godlike creature Jasmine. The other patrons in the diner drop to their knees, and a horrified Fred wanders out onto the streets alone. So, what do we think of this episode? Dave?
Just particular sorts of things of the higher being concept kind of coming into play, with especially just the one side of her, everybody and their grandma just falls to their knees on it. There's the person or two that can either see it, and thankfully there's the concept of they can maybe see through the skies either after a particular point in time or certain action being taken. But nevertheless, it's kind of the case of this evil has something to easily disguise themselves, and just all the stuff she's been saying has the secondary meaning behind it, and it does not seem very good.
Yes. So have you figured out how people are able to see her true form?
Not specifically, no. Like, from what it supposedly showed from there was either brain chemistry and or a particular amount of suffering that they supposedly go through. But even then, I'm not concrete of what the concept is to actually see her Jasmine's true form.
Okay, interesting, because they don't outright say it in this episode, but they do kind of reveal it. But I'm not gonna say it just yet. But when you find out what it is, you'll be like, oh, that's so obvious. How didn't I see it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the concept, but it's one of the things that, yeah, this, with all the stuff happening in the episode and everything else this kind of means, oh boy, stuff is gonna be a little crazy, supposedly.
Yes. So, for international titles for this episode, we actually have a few. So there's a few that are just The Birth or Jasmine, which those are fine. However, in Czech, it's Happiness Wherever You Look.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. In Finnish, it's Lucky Days.
Yeah.
In French, it's Sweet Bliss.
Yeah, that definitely fits.
In Italian, it's Happy and Contented. In Russian, it's Happy and Joyful People.
There you go.
In Brazilian,
matching up with the English.
Yeah, kinda. In Brazilian Portuguese, it's Pure Happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some pretty good. There's some pretty good names.
Yeah, especially with the last one. Again, I can't remember where I heard it, but there's kind of the concept of, or the saying that the greatest evil can come from the purest joy or emotions, other sorts of things, and pure happiness coming from this particular evil monster from all the particular stuff. It's like,
Yes, it's going to get good. Alrighty, so if there's nothing else about this episode, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis for next week, which I didn't do for the last few episodes because they were like really important episodes and I kind of didn't want to give anything away just yet. Okay. However, for the next episode, which is called The Magic Bullet. With Angel and the others under Jasmine's extraordinary divine power, Fred's life is in danger as she goes on the run. After discovering the secret to breaking Jasmine's spell over the nation's citizens, Fred must find a way to save the others before she's captured and killed.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like what this is going to be going on to.
Oh, it's going to get very good. Very, very good. Anyway, until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.